Hi friends! I am back in my garage for my favorite part about my Volvo 2.5T engine rebuild project, because today I'll be rebuilding the short block. I just got this short block back from the machine shop and it has been honed, but I'll show you that in a sec because it's flipped upside down right now. But it's also cleaned, as you can see. And here you got the intermediate section and the polished crankshaft, clean oil pump, and the super clean pistons. Look at that. So I think you can see why I'm so excited to rebuild this, because everything looks like new again. Now the first part that I want to reinstall is the crankshaft, and of course I'll be using some new crankshaft bearings, but before I'm going to place them into my short block, I gotta clean this surface real quick. Well, real quick, you gotta do it thoroughly, because you don't want any nastiness and oil residue to get in there. Oh, and by the way, I'm using brake cleaner to do this. Of course, like I said, this has already been cleaned at the machine shop, but it has been sitting here for 2 days now. So we do want to get rid of bits of dust and everything, you know. You can never be too careful, I think, with these things. And these are the new bearings that I'll be using. You got 10 normal bearings and 2 thrust bearings, and those thrust bearings you're supposed to install right here, but you can clearly see where they're located. Before I put the crankshaft bearings back in place, I cleaned the back side of the bearing with some degreaser too. And after that, I just carefully pressed it in place. I got 2 types of crankshaft bearings, but the ones with the holes in it should be placed onto the short block. And then I repeated that same process 5 more times, cleaning the bearings and then pressing them into place. I do try my best to put the bearings perfectly in the middle right away by centering one end and then lightly pressing on the other side to slide the bearing in place. And now I'm just going to use this little plastic tool to make sure that all of the bearings are properly centered. And to do that, I put a little plastic tool over the flat part of the short block, because that's how low we want the end caps to be laying. Of course, I'm using a plastic tool for this so that I don't damage the surface of the short block itself. Now I'm just going to repeat the same process of placing these bearings on the intermediate section. And yes, I'm doing that on the floor because I don't feel like moving the short block all the time because it's a bit heavy. So I think it's easier this way. Now I know you don't see it in the video, but of course this process is exactly the same as on the short block itself. So yes, I did clean both the intermediate section and the bearings before pressing them into place. And as you can see, I'm using the 6 bearings that don't have holes in them. Alright, now next thing I want to do is put the crankshaft in place after cleaning it, of course. And theoretically I could go and put some oil on the bearings before I go and put the crankshaft in place, because I'm planning on starting this engine in 2 weeks or something. Well, it will probably be 3 weeks, but that's my plan, so oil will do it. But if you're planning on waiting a bit longer before starting your engine, it's better to use some assembly lube. And that's what I'm going to be using on these bearings before I put the crankshaft in place, because you can never go wrong with assembly lube. I personally always prefer to apply the lube to the bearings using my finger, to make sure that it gets distributed properly. And of course, I'm wearing a clean glove to do so, since it's very important not to get any dirt or dust in here. And after putting lube on all bearings, I could go and put the crankshaft in place. Now before I go and place this intermediate section over here, you gotta go and put some liquid gasket in here, and you can either put it on the short block itself or on the intermediate section, but I've decided to put it on there since these little thingies, I don't know what they're called, make it a bit harder to put the liquid gasket all around there. So let's put it on the intermediate section. Since we haven't been cleaning enough already, I started off by degreasing the surface where I'll apply the gasket, which is of course what you always want to do before putting a new gasket in place. Like I just mentioned, I'm using this pink liquid gasket, which is what you're supposed to use on these engines. I'm just starting off by applying it all the way across the surface, since that's always the hardest part because it makes my thumb hurt. After that, I personally always just use my finger to distribute the gasket. You could also use a small paint roller to do this, but I've always done it this way and it works fine too. I then put some assembly lube on the bearings before I go and put everything back together. With the intermediate section in place, it is now time to bolt everything back together. There's 3 sizes of bolts that connect the short block and the intermediate section, and I'm starting off by torquing down all of the big bolts. Now the second set of bolts are these M8 bolts and they're located on the outside. Now there's 2 different lengths because 3 of them are longer than the rest, because these 3 holes are higher, so that's where the longer bolts are located. And that's 12. Now, before I go and put the engine on the engine stand, which is what I wanted to do next, I'm gonna go and install the oil squirters, because I almost forgot. But it's easier now that the engine's upside down. But it would have been even easier if I did this before installing the crankshaft. Because they're located all the way down there. But if you're like me and you almost forget to install your oil squirters, you can use a magnet to put the bolt in place and a screwdriver to put the oil squirter itself in place. And by the way, this crankshaft's turning so smoothly, that's satisfying. Well, let's go and put this oil pump back together. I did get it disassembled to get it cleaned from the inside, because why not while you're already at the machine shop? Now that I got the oil pump back in one piece, it is time to go and reinstall it. But of course, first we got to replace the thin rubber seal that goes on the outside, followed by the seal on the inside. That second seal is a bit harder to install, and I'm starting off by carefully tapping it into place using a hammer. I then put the oil pump on the short block using a new gasket, of course. I'm not fully installing it just yet, but I am putting the 4 bolts in place to make sure that the oil pump is centered properly. Before I push it in any further, I put a little bit of oil on the outer seal and then onto the fun part, using a little screwdriver to put the inner seal around the crankshaft. This is an important step, because if you don't do this carefully, the little spring that's inside of the seal will come out. And yes, I'm sure there are other ways to do this, but I kinda like to do it this way. Now, of course, we also gotta install a seal on the other side of the crankshaft, but that one's really easy as well. Alright, got the crankshaft and both seals in place. So now we can go and put this short block on the engine stand, and then we can install the pistons. Yay, engine magically appeared on the engine stand. But now it is time to prep the pistons, because I still gotta install the piston rings and these new bearings, of course, and then we can put them in place. But I'm already so excited because they're so clean. They look like new, I think. Well, almost like new, but this makes me so happy. Oh yeah, and these are the piston rings I'll be using. Now let's get the hardest part out of the way first. Well, in my opinion, that's putting the piston rings in place. And I am doing this without gloves too, because I don't want my gloves to get stuck in here. Oh, and by the way, these openings should face a specific way, but I'm going to put every ring in place and then I'm going to turn them, okay? These rings also say which side's the top side, so. Now you got all of these gaps of the piston rings, and these different gaps should be facing 120 degrees away from each other, and then these lower two, the scraper springs, I don't know what you call them, but they should be facing away 90 degrees. So now I'm just going to turn them all so that they're facing away from each other. And if my explanation was bad, because my English is bad, here you got a picture. Alright, so now it's time for the new bearings, and I think you already know the drill. I'm gonna go and clean these surfaces and then I'm gonna put the bearings in place. But first I gotta undo these bolts. Oh, and by the way, you do want to use new bolts, but I've put these in place just so I can keep the end caps attached to these con rods. These are the bearings I'll be using, and there's two different bearings in there. Now you just want to make sure that this one's on the top, the sputter. I don't know what you call this in English, but you can see it. By the way, almost forgot to show you, but I just flipped the engine and now you can see that the cylinders have been honed and that looks amazing. So now let's reinstall the pistons. Now I want to get started with piston number 1, and I'm just going to turn the crankshaft so that it's all the way at the bottom to make it easier for myself to install the end cap. Now before I tap the pistons in place, I'm gonna go and put some oil on the cylinder walls. Alright, let's go. Now before I can go and put this piston in the engine block, I gotta compress these piston rings, of course, and to do that I'm going to use this tool. The principle of this tool is very simple. You just put it around the piston and then tighten it to compress the piston rings. After that, it's time to put it into the short block, first making sure that the tool is installed completely straight. I then like to tighten the compressing tool just a little bit extra before I start using the soft part of my hammer to tap the piston into place. Piston number 1's in place, so now let's turn the engine and then we can install the end cap. Piston number 1 is done, so 4 more to go. And with all 5 pistons in place, this short block's all nice and done. And with the short block done, I'm going to call it a day. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed rebuilding this short block. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!